Hello, everyone, and welcome to TreeLines podcast. I'm Paul Jeffries, Reforestation Advisor for ArborGen, and I'm joined today with Jason Watson, former classmate and fellow colleague. And getting back to the lumber quality, the study that came out from the University of Georgia that was looking at stiffness and strength, how much the board flexes and how much it takes to break a board. The fast-grown plantation wood, quote, air quotes, fast-grown plantation wood, met and exceeded all of those requirements. So again, the
from SPIB,
yes,
right.
The architectural associations have proven that not the case when it comes to the plantation wood.
Yeah.
So on your site prep on your track, are you also, I know you mentioned that you're going to do a herbicide spray to control the competition at the beginning. Is there anything else that you're going to do pre-plant to get the track ready?
No, I don't think we're going to have to. I talked with our contractor, and I think I was worried about, as we talked about earlier, the challenging pulpwood markets. There's a good bit of residue, the tops and whatnot that were left out on the stand. Mm-hmm. But after they inspected it, they were confident that they could, using that V blade that is mounted on front of the bulldozers, the crawlers, they feel confident that they can, shear a lot of that residue or whatever you want to call it, slash, out of the way to still make a good path for the seedling to be planted.
So that's going to benefit you. That's going to save money as far as having to do a prescribed burn. You're not going to have that investment. So
exactly,
the machine planting is going to save that step. Plus, we all know the liability now that is the liability that you're going to have with, or the reason why people do not want to burn. At this, because of the smoke and issues, and knowing your track and its proximity there to
the four-lane major highway.
Four-lane major highway is definitely going to be an issue. So, Jason, delving back into the decision to plant bareroot, and you're going to machine plant your bareroot seedlings. Now there is a big push for containerized seedlings. And for those that may not know the difference, the bareroot seedling is grown in the nursery bed, and when it's lifted, it is put into a bag. It doesn't have any rooting media on it, and they are sprayed with a clay application that helps with controlling moisture. And the containerized is grown in a little what we call stubby cell they're about 5 to 6 inches long with potting soil around them. So when you decided on the seedlings that you're going to use, why did you go with the bareroot?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think that, and we were realizing, that's the great thing is landowners have the option. We've said before, I know just being an ArborGen employee and working in reforestation every single day, we've always said, the slogan, should you plant bareroot or container? And we say yes, or it depends.
Right.
And so that's what it comes back to. And really, we were settled on bareroot from the get-go. And the biggest part of that was because we wanted to, first of all, we knew we wanted to do a really good job of site preparation. We knew that was, decision number one. And we still tell people that all the time when you're examining what your budget is going to be. Let's say it's a reforestation project. You've received your income from the timber harvest, the final harvest, and then you start thinking about your budget. The first thing we always advise people to do at ArborGen is make sure you're setting the right trajectory for the stand with good site preparation. That's item number one. Don't ever skimp on site prep. And so knowing that we were going to do how important that was to us to do a good chemical site preparation, we felt like we could get a good survival with bareroot seedlings. And the biggest reason is because supervision. I know that I'm going to be there the whole time, making sure that the seedlings are going to be, you know, 6 inches deep. You know, nothing fancy, but making sure they're down planted above where that root collar is.
Right.
Was at the nursery above that line. So, and making sure that I was gonna be there, you know, the entire time. But one of the things that became even more attractive to us was planting bare root is when our contractor mentioned that they thought that it would be good to machine plant it because of what I mentioned about the residual slash that's out there on the site, and they could do a good job of pushing that slash out of the way, and not having to do like a V shear like site prep. That they could just do that when they were planting the seedlings. That we said, oh gosh, that's like it's kind of like a site prep but planting in one.
Right.
So that bulldozer has that V blade mounted to it, but right behind that V blade and bulldozer is the tree planter. And so one of the things we kind of know is that the bareroot seedling then is going to go down probably 7 inches. It's probably going to go down, 7 or 8 inches down into the soil. And so we definitely didn't want to put the money into containers at that point, an extra, I'm approximating here, but an extra 50 or $60 an acre in the containers. We were like, we're not doing that. We know that, there's really no need to necessarily do that. Plus the other big thing with containers is, we knew that we were not going to be able to plant in October or early November. And that's and that's one thing that's great about containers is that if you're going to plant container, whether it's loblolly or longleaf / pine, a real big kind of bang that you get for your buck is to do that early.
Right.
And that is wonderful if you can plant containers early like that. And so, but we, with our contractor, knowing it was going to be December, it was going to fall within the normal bareroot window, that we were going to, plant bareroot seedlings with the machine planting. And I'm still going to be there. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to be there the whole time. I'm going to be in Mississippi when December of 2024 rolls around. But for supervision purposes, but at the same time, all those things together, we knew that we were going to go with bareroot seedlings in this. But we could also optimize our genetic choices as well by going with bareroot.
Right. Well, thanks for the warning that you're going to be in the area in December. I'll be sure to be.
That's right.
I was planning on being present also, as that was.
Yep.
Going. So, talking about the machine planting with the bare roots and the average survival of what one can expect. It sounds like, y'all have it laid out very well, the plan, obviously doing the herbicide, and then coming back with the machine planter. And then studies have shown in the past that machine planted bare root seedlings are on average 90 to 95% survival. So with that high of a survival expected, it brings back just the importance of that planting density of what you were discussing earlier. And talking about the planting density and the quality of the wood and then just all the other benefits of planting density, why did you pick that wider spacing? I mean, there's several different factors there that are, let's face it, with today's genetics, they're all positive. Do you want to touch on some of that? Elaborate on a couple of those?
Yeah, well, without getting into it too deeply, there was some really good work that was done. I don't think a lot of people are probably aware of this, but I can't help but give him a plug. But Barry Shiver, our good friend, was one of the people that were involved. Was one of the guys that was involved in this study, doing research at the University of Georgia back in the 90s. They had done some really good work looking at what is the optimum spacing, the stocking rate. And actually, I will mention this really quick. I know that Bronson Bullock at the UGA PMRC is beginning some other trials right now that are going in the ground. But back in the 90s, they did some really good work, and they found, I mean, they did really good spacing studies, 100 trees per acre all the way up to 1,500 trees per acre. But the optimum, or the where volume reached its peak, was between 400 trees per acre and 800 trees per acre. But there was very little difference between those two at age 14. Very little difference. But the biggest difference was that, planting 700 trees per acre, when you go in there to thin, you're going to have a lot of really small trees that are pulpwood, mostly all pulpwood.
Right.
I mean, the tree quality may be there, but the size requirements wouldn't be there for chip and saw. So that's why knowing, and I'm so glad you said that, Paul, but about the survival rate, because knowing that we're expecting good survival, and also with the enhanced genetics, we wanted to make sure that we gave that stand an opportunity to grow and have a bigger tree size. That knowing that the volume per acre is very similar between 400 stems per acre and 800 trees per acre, remarkably similar. We didn't want to go in there at thinning age and as I mentioned, paint ourselves into a corner with really small trees, because if we go in there and we only plant 450 trees per acre, let's say we end up with 400 or 390 even per acre, we're going to have bigger trees when we go in there, and we'll have a more marketable product with chip and saw. And it may be that the wood buyers at the time are saying, "How old is this wood?" Well, we may say, "Well, it's only 14 or 15 years old." Okay, we want it to be another 2 years old. That's fine.
Right.
We've got that. I mentioned the optionality, the flexibility. We can still grow the trees another couple of years, but they're going to be bigger trees growing that same volume.
Exactly.
And so we just, again, it goes back to the flexibility with the better genetics. And that's why we're going in with this plan to do it this way, to set ourselves up to have more flexibility.
Right. And those, looking at those planting densities also, and looking at density studies that have been done. I mean, let's face it, you and I, when we were in college, studying or measuring planting density trials, Dr. Sam Land at Mississippi State, they had density trials on our school for us. And one of the projects that I had the luxury of measuring twice was they had three spacings. They had 5x5, 8x8, and 10x10. And on all of those, there was a stark difference in the quality of the stems at the end of the rotation for the 10x10 and the 8x8. But the 5x5, when they had over 90% survival in that stand, the 5x5, the stems were still below pulpwood size, and it was you could tell that the trees were the term that's used a lot of times is stagnated if they are not thinned and that crown is opened up to allow them to grow. And looking back at planting density, I was at a meeting and I had a conversation with a Mississippi logger. And I asked him, I said, "What is your smallest piece of logging equipment?" And he said, "Well, the smallest skidder that he had was the distance, the width of it was feet." And if you're planting seedlings, I mean, 10x10 is 435 trees to the acre. But you still only have 10 feet between your rows. And when you have rows that are that close together and you have trees that are that in that close proximity to one another, you're setting yourself up for a lot of logging damage during that first thin or during that thin. So you mentioned earlier, I believe you said that the width between your rows is going to be 14 feet. That is already setting up for that future venture into the stand to go in and take out some of that
Yeah,
material and open that stand
yeah.
up, and you're going to be minimizing your logging damage.
That's
Um,
exactly right. I'm glad you mentioned that, Paul, because and listen, there are a lot of people. I mentioned we're in the regeneration kind of sector of the forest business. There's a whole lot of people in harvesting and wood flow that have forgotten more about it than I'll ever know. And I'd love for people to email me if they get this with any things I'm saying that are wrong. Um, but just to throw it out there, yeah, I'm glad you touched on it because what we would ideally like to do is, like I said, thin this stand one time
right,
and then come back for a final harvest. And that would involve, if we can do it, take out every other row. And I mean, we know that 14 feet is not wide enough for just pure selection. We're going to have to take out a row. Plus, we also know um, loggers are under so much pressure now with fuel cost and needing to make good production. We're in this. I think it's important to say this right now from the from not the get go, but I was trying to say, like, I think it's important too that we're doing things, we're trying to set these stands up with the loggers in mind also, that we're looking at their productivity, their production they can make when they're thinning these stands. And so, the fact that I think we're going to be planting these in rows is going to help with machine planting, but also for them to be able to take out an entire row and then maybe snip a few trees out within the leave rows that are,
right,
there will be some trees that are suppressed or uh, still some trees that, they're not going to be fork free or fusiform free. Trees are not immune to that, even with advanced genetics. So that's ideally what we're going to be doing here. But, setting it up to where it is. Yeah, it is keeping that bigger machinery in mind as
right,
well.
right. And it's all about planning for that future, that
Yep,
future crop and return on your investment.
exactly.
Because let's face it, in the life of a stand of timber or in the life of a timberland owner,
Yep,
and you and I both are going through this at the same time. You're reforesting this year. I will be reforesting next planting season.
yep.
There is absolutely nothing more stressing than the reforestation of your stand. Because as you and I are experiencing, and landowners and foresters have experienced or constantly experience every year,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of factors that go into it that have got to line up just right. And
That's right.
you've got to get that
Crucial.
done right on the
Yeah.
beginning. So back to your planting density and the benefits from it. Um, a lot of non-industrial private forest landowners now are looking for alternative ways to make money, intermediate ways to incomes from their stands of timber. And across the southeast, uh, when the leaves start to fall in October and when the temperatures start dropping, all landowners, most landowners, their attention turns to wildlife and wildlife management. And
Yep.
one of those intermittent sources of income for a lot of landowners are hunting leases, and the ability to lease, market that land for two people for hunting leases. Does your
Mm-hmm.
family lease the hunting rights on your property, or is that something that y'all maintain for family use?
It is still, there's no hunting leases for that property. They're still uh, used by members of the family to hunt on every year. That's
So
correct,
that
Paul.
being said, it's probably going to be beneficial to you and your family members that these wider spacings, you're not going to get canopy closure. The crowns are not going to close as soon because there's going to be 14 feet between the rows.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that is very vital is improving wildlife habitat. And without going down another rabbit hole for another podcast session, one of the benefits I think that everybody can agree upon is when you get that sunlight and you maintain that sunlight to the forest floor and you get that natural browse
Yep.
for the wildlife. You and I, when we were in forestry school, we had classes for wildlife management,
Yep.
and we had great professors for that. And that
George
natural,
Hurst.
oh yes, oh yes, that natural native browse. Oh yeah, Dr. Jones, Dr. Jeannie Jones,
Yep.
Dr. Hurst, Dr. Berger, those Dr. Damaris at Mississippi State, those great wildlife professors will all tell you that it's that native browse that is what's so important to your
Yep.
white-tailed deer, your wild turkey, your bobwhite quail, and let's face it, all the songbirds that come in and use those. Um, that's a benefit to wider
Mm-hmm.
spacing. And if
That's
the
right.
landowner likes to lease their property, that's also
Mm-hmm.
a benefit of being able to say, hey, this property lease is worth this price
Yep.
because look, there's there's things here to benefit that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly right. I think that, for so many, you mentioned it, the acronym NIPF, non-industrial private forest landowners. I mean, certainly the big timber companies have all their land leased normally but for a lot of smaller private landowners, it's some of the properties are leased. Certainly, though, there's a hunting heritage though that's out there that the families. I know with your family still hunts it, Paul, on your property, hunts your property, I should say.
Right.
But it is, I mean, it's all about in that situation. It's all about optimizing the possible timber incomes, but wildlife is normally a very close number two, second objective that's out there.
Right.
And so that is one of the things that's really interesting. And I just spoke to a timber investment company a couple of weeks ago, actually, that it was during their sustainable forestry initiative annual training that they go through, and they were talking about biodiversity and how wildlife habitat and fits. You mentioned songbirds, all this kind of fits into the same under the same umbrella. And that was one of the things they were talking about is having that ability to, they had invited me to come in to talk about genetic options that could enhance that ability to, be able to flex with smaller trees, lower, I keep saying smaller, but lower trees per acre on wider spacings that could create more beneficial habitat like what you're describing.
Right.
So there's a whole host of or a whole like suite of new things that you can do. And I think it's a collectively that just goes to show what the industry has done and accomplished over the last several years, many years, to get to where we are today.
Jason, back when you decided on the seedlings and you've made all these plans, you've got your site prep planned out. It sounds like you've got a great plan for that. Sounds like you've got all the bases covered. You know, as I talked about earlier, one of the most stressful or the most stressful time in a timberland owner's life is the reforestation. Is there, what else are you doing? What other steps are you going to take that is going to basically ensure the survival of your stands and the survival of your seedlings after they're planted?
Yeah. So, and as you pointed out so well, I mean, yes, it's like I said, we're going to set the foundation with the chemical site preparation to give that seedling as much sunlight and water and soil nutrition in year one and year two, especially as we can, as much as we can. But I guess the other big thing that we haven't discussed, and it doesn't, I can just briefly mention this is another big key to this is we'll definitely be having the seedlings shipped. Excuse me, seedlings shipped. In refrigerated trailers, refrigerated vans, and then held in a cooler that's set at 36 to 38 degrees. We're just basically trying to get them stored at 40 degrees or less. And so we're doing everything we possibly can to keep them in a controlled environment before they get planted. We do know that if they're out of that cooler, and it gets up too warm, then they just start to consume their own carbohydrates. So, but the biggest thing is just transporting those seedlings in refrigerated units, and then taking only as many as we have to take to the site per day as we need out there. And then it's just doing the supervision, as I mentioned before. And so that should get us on the right road to complete the project, Paul.
Yeah, well, good. It definitely is. That seedling handling and seedling care is definitely a priority.
Yep.
Let's face it. When the seedlings are lifted from the nursery and we take the care of lifting the seedlings, packaging the seedlings, making sure that they are stored in a cooler that is at our nursery, and then loaded onto refrigerated vans and dropped off. Once they leave that nursery, they're out of our hands, and it's very vital that seedlings are cared for, because let's face it, they are living organisms. They are they are not. This is not something that is an inert, organism.
It's not a widget. It's not something that can be back on a shelf. That's right.
I mean, it's not. It is something that is that has mortality. It can. Its health can and survival can be jeopardized by poor handling. So it's great that you're taking those steps, and you're making sure that they are going to be taken care of at that from the time they're lifted to their time that they're delivered.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. It sounds like you've got a great plan. It sounds like you've got everything you need lined up for this project that is going forward. And it sounds like that after the seedlings are in the ground and everything is taken care of, it sounds like you're going to have a great stand going forward, and something to look forward to on down the road when it comes time for you to receive the return on your investment.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch it develop.
It is. It is a lot of fun when you put a lot of that hard work. You put all that hard work, and let's face it, all these years of studying and what you and I have learned, made our career out of, and you get down to the end of it, and you can reap the reward of your hard work and dedication. So with that being said, I would like to thank you all for coming back for the second episode of the TreeLines podcast, and I'd like to thank Mr. Jason Watson for coming back and answering some more questions about his family forest land in Collinsville, Mississippi. Come back for future episodes where we will be discussing topics that will be of interest to foresters, landowners, tree planters, and other general enthusiasts that are interested in reforestation, forestry, and habitat improvement. Thank you.
Thanks.